Hello and welcome to Cootz. Our today's topic is the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The outlook of geopolitical history states that this is a multi-dimensional crisis, and we will tell you all about these dimensions in detail. The first is a deeply historical and political question about Russia's position in Europe. If we look at the last 4 centuries, Russia was very much part of the European order with Prussia, Britain, France, the Austria-Hungarian and the Ottoman empires. But the Bolshevik Revolution fundamentally put it at odds with the rest of Europe. Russia supported revolutions in other European countries, and the power struggle acquired a deep ideological character in 1917. But during the Second World War, the West needed Russia to fight Germany. This alliance broke down subsequently and led to a deep enmity between Russia and other states of the Soviet Union and the West. At the end of the Cold War in 1991, Russia thought that it could become a part of Europe. But after the breakup of the Soviet Union, it was neglected and its interests in securing its rightful place in Europe was ignored. Therefore, Russia has mobilized troops to assert its role and primacy in the regional security order. The second issue concerns security. While the Warsaw Pact between Russia and its East European satellite states collapsed, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, persisted and kept expanding, closing in on Russia. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin now wants to draw a line and wants bona fide security guarantees to stop NATO expansion and inclusion of new members in the bloc, as well as reverse some of the old decisions on military and weapons deployment. The threat of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a strategic counterweight. The third aspect of the crisis is Putin's idea of stitching back the old Soviet Union in a different form based on the common political and military interests. They already have that Eurasian Economic Union and a Central Security Organization with a lot of the former members of the Soviet Union. They are not actually integrating them, but creating institutions and structures for putting together Humpty Dumpty or the Soviet Union into a reasonable shape. Remember, Putin recently acknowledged that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. He wants to undo that past as his legacy. The West, on the other hand, does not want Russia to sanitize or gain a kind of veto over its neighborhood. Besides, former Soviet republics like the Baltic nations of Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia deny Russia's paternalistic interest in them and do not want to go back to a structure they willingly broke out of. The US is following its old protectionist Monroe Doctrine that once warned European nations against the further colonization or puppet monarchs. In South Asia, India has sensitivities about Chinese proximity to Nepal and Sri Lanka. All large countries tend to seek a sanitized zone around them. In that sense, Russia is trying to do the same just as China is trying to build its favorable sphere of influence in Asia. The story of international relation is always about deferring to the interests of the great powers as opposed to the protecting the interests of the smaller countries. The fourth dimension in Ukraine's international relations in the face of Russia's no Ukraine in NATO demand, NATO has promised Ukraine to induct it in 2008. And though US President Joe Biden says this cannot happen immediately, Russia wants a legal guarantee against a new inclusion. Answering the question, what about Ukraine's own interests and choices? If NATO comes into Ukraine, instead of Ukraine going into NATO, that's also not acceptable. Finally, there's Ukraine's domestic structure. There are large Russian-speaking populations. Russia has already taken Crimea and backed independent entities in eastern Ukraine. It wants deep devolution and federalism. On Putin raising the pitch, now he is seeking legacy. In power for 20 years, he has revived the Russian economy and wants to correct the injustice of 1991. He probably thought that with the West too, divided and the US focusing on consolidating its position in the Indo-Pacific to tame China, the time is right to negotiate bargaining strength. Remember, Biden reached out to Putin to settle matters in Europe. So, the latter has raised the stakes. For more such content, don't forget to subscribe to Cootz.